All right, welcome back, guys. How you doing? Welcome back to Heroes and Men. I got Ryan Christensen here from Hypnosis for Men. He's somebody that I've been following for a long time, that I've actually worked with, and he's into some really cool stuff, and he's going to tell us about it today. So, Ryan,
Awesome.
tell these guys who you are, what you're about, and what it is you do, please.
Awesome. So my name is Ryan Christensen. I am a master hypnotist and performance coach. My website is hypnosisformen.com. What I really do is help men identify and get rid of blocks that are in their way. So all those little things you do to sabotage yourself, all those little things that are in the way of you getting the life you want to live, that's what I help people find and figure out new solutions for.
Nice. And how did you get into that work?
Well, a lot of it actually came from a lot of the work I was doing on myself. Like back in 2018, I got divorced for the second time. Started trying to get in the dating market, which is really the first time I actually had to be in the conventional dating market, because I went from like high school to college to the Marine Corps, got married in the Marines, got divorced, and then got right into like the kink and the swinging scene in DC. And so I'd been dating all up in that jazz for like 14, 15 years at that point. So all of my partners and everything else that I was finding were in that space. So I hadn't actually dated normal women since high school. And at 44 years old, it's like, okay, I'm a little bit rusty, right? And it was just not working out for me. Like there's this thing called Tinder apparently that you're supposed to download, and you do a swipey thing and people are supposed to show up. I don't know. So, I'm sitting here doing all this work on myself, trying to figure out like, why the heck do I keep on getting myself in these bad relationships? Why do I keep on messing this stuff up? So I got back into the red pill. I've been reading some of Rollo Tomasi's essays back in the day before he even had his books out, just when he was doing blogging back in the pickup day and stuff like that. And so I started getting back in there and reading Rollo Tomasi, and that took me to Rich Cooper, from Entrepreneurs in Cars, and that took me to John from Modern Life Dating. And John was a character. He's a character for sure. But you could tell that he knew what he was talking about it when it came to dating and getting dates and meeting women in the modern age. All right, fair enough. So there's something for me to learn there. So I signed up for his body language mastery course back in October 2019. And got in there and got an ass kicking in half. Just like, oh, you're doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, this wrong, this screwed up, this screwed up, this screwed up. I'm like, whoa. So it was a lot. But one of the presentations I saw was Ryan Fowler doing his presentation on toxic shame, emotional baggage, right? I'm like, well, sure, Catholic, carrying around a lot of that, right? It comes with the background.
Yeah, tell me about
So I did a session with him and just cleared up a lot of stuff. It's just like, it felt like there was so much stuff that I wasn't carrying around anymore. Just felt lighter. And I felt more free to do stuff that was more difficult before, right? It's like if you're carrying around 50 pounds on your back, everything's hard to do.
Right.
Drop that backpack full of rocks, all of a sudden everything's a lot easier to do, even though nothing else has really changed, right? So started dating a girl I was like half my age. That's a plus, right? Started making a lot more moves in terms of professionally stuff like that. I ended up starting my own business. And what I was thinking, the place that I was in at the time, is I'd been working in the intelligence community for 23 years. Well, 22 years at that point, right? So as a contractor for the federal government, I'd done counterterrorism for like 7.5 years, or counterproliferation for like another 7, chasing weapons of mass destruction, that sort of thing. And at that point in my career, like I'd gotten senior enough that they didn't let me play international man of mystery anymore. And so now I'm doing most like project management, development sort of stuff, right? Boring stuff, office job, and just not nearly as fulfilling. And having started to do all this work on myself and realizing what an impact guys like John or Rich from Entrepreneurs in Cars, or like Ryan Stone, or all these guys that were doing individual coaching, that the impact these guys were having on people's lives, I'm like, wow, like that's very different from my experience. Because when you're in that intelligence world, like you're doing stuff and you're taking action at a distance. Like if you do things right, nobody ever knows what the hell you did. And like maybe eventually you'll get a hint that something changed, perhaps down the road, maybe ish. Right? You're like nudging boats in history, and like you never really have clear indications that the stuff that you're doing has an impact. So you just kind of have to hope, right? Whereas if you're working with a guy one-on-one, well, then you see those changes immediately. And you know that those changes are happening because of work you've done with that person, right? You can have that visceral, immediate feedback. And I'm like, I want some of that. So I was actually thinking about becoming a psychologist, going back and getting my PhD, getting my PsyD, and becoming a psychologist. Especially because Rich Cooper at the time was doing a show called Before the Train Wreck with Dr. Sean T. Smith. He's a psychologist in Colorado. Great guy. Really liked his insights. I'm like, man, I can do that. I've been through therapy a few times in my past. Always got something out of that. It's like, that sounds like a good idea. But then I was looking at it. It's like, okay, that's going to be 6 years, $300,000 to $500,000. Don't even really get to start my career until I'm 50. Not terribly appealing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
late 20s, 30s, sure, got a lot of road ahead of me. Like 40s, that's a different start, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did, after having that experience with Ryan Fowler and just kind of seeing how powerful hypnosis can be, I'm like, well, let me go take a look at that. So January, February 2022, or sorry, 2020, I got certified as a hypnotist. I went through about 100 hours of training, started playing around mostly with guys in the community. I was like doing free stuff for them and just seeing what I could do. And it turned out that I kind of got a talent for this,
Hmm.
kind of have a gift for this. I'm like, okay, cool. So March and April, I did some more training, got some more techniques under my belt, and launched Hypnosis for Men at the end of April, beginning of May 2020. So right in the middle of the fucking pandemic, right? Right in the middle of everything, because I'm sitting around at home, we got nothing else to do.
Right.
Right? You can only play video games for about 2 weeks before you get really bored, right?
Right.
So started seeing guys, and the beautiful thing about hypnosis is that you don't really need to be in person to do it, right? I can do it over Zoom. All I really need to be able to do is talk to somebody and be able to see them, watch their reactions while they're doing it. So doing it over Zoom from my living room, I can do that all day long.
Right.
So I've had the ability and the privilege really of being able to work with guys from all over the world. Guys in Australia, did a session for a guy in Siberia once, right? All over Europe, Middle East, Latin America, Asia, everywhere, everywhere. And I could do it from the comfort of my home. Don't have to leave.
Right.
So start having to go back to working it again. Like, so now I'm balancing my hypnosis business and my regular career. And at some, at one point in like July, August, September of 2020, like I'm doing 80, 90-hour weeks every week. And it's just like too much. So I just hit this point. It's like, I got to choose. Got to choose. I can't do both. Got to choose. And I'm like, I do not want to be sitting around in the office doing nothing. I'd much rather be doing the hypnosis work because I'm getting a heck of a lot more out of it. These guys are getting great results and making major changes in their life. That's what I want to do. So I left my old job, my old career in October 2020, started doing this full time. I've been doing this full time ever since.
Wow, man. It's a hell of a story.
Thank you.
What got you into the Marines? First of all, that's my,
Mhm.
if you can even have like a favorite branch, but that's the one branch that I was like, yeah, that's the one I want to mess around with. I think because like when I was a kid, they used to call the Marines the suck.
Yep.
I was like, whatever place is
Welcome
called
to
the
the suck.
suck. Yeah, I was like that. I want to go to the suck, which is sadomasochistic, but whatever.
Well, it's so at the time when I was in Kansas, I was living in Kansas, and I just hit this point where I'm like realizing if I stay here, like I'm going to be doing the same damn thing with the same damn people my entire life, and I cannot do that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to join the military and get my foot out the door, right? Do something, right? So I went down to the recruiting office and I was kind of looking around. I was like, well, I could do the Air Force. There's a major Air Force base there in Wichita.
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Navy is definitely out, like Army, like, okay, but not really. So if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to freaking do this, like, I'm going to do it. Might as well like really do it. So I walked in the Marine recruiter's office, and originally I was going to do some like reserve stuff. But I scored really high on the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, which is this like standard test they take to figure out how good you're going to be. Well, I basically maxed the thing out.
Wow.
Right. I'm walking around with an IQ of 130, like that ain't hard. Right. So like, you should take this other test. So they sent me back down to Oklahoma City to take this other test, which is basically a defense language proficiency test or an aptitude test, where it's basically like 4 hours of gibberish. It's all testing like how well and how quickly you can pick up like vocabulary and syntax and things like that to see how well you and how quickly you can learn the language. Well, after 4 hours of getting my brain turned to mush, like turns out I can learn languages pretty good. I've studied like Japanese and Spanish and Latin. I've studied a little bit of French, a little bit of German, right, a little bit of Italian. And so I pick up languages pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So they said, we want you to do this other thing. We want you to be a Russian linguist. We're going to teach you Russian. I'm like, okay. This means I get to leave Kansas, right? You know, send me somewhere else. It's like, okay, I'm good. That'll work, right? Because that was my way to get the hell out of Kansas. So they sent me down through basic training. Did that in July of 2019. No, was it 2019? 2017. And finished that up. I went to language school in Monterey, California for a year. That was basically all 2018, and then did some more follow-up training in Texas in 2019. Got stationed out in Hawaii, of all places, in 2019, and that was what I did for about 3.5 years out there in Hawaii. I was a Russian linguist, translating Russian. And I met my first wife at language school. She was in the Air Force at the time. So we got married like way too young for the wrong reasons, and that didn't work out very well. She had a lot of stuff happen in her life, and all of it kind of came to head after we had our first kid. So she had some major mental breakdown and ended up having to take care of her and the kid and myself and run everything. And oh, by the way, the girlfriend that I'd been seeing in Kansas before I left, well, it turns out she was pregnant. Baby is mine. So that was fun.
Oh,
Right? It was just a whole bunch of stuff at the same time. So my Marine career was not exactly what you'd call successful. I served honorably without distinction. I was really good at my job, but I wasn't terribly good about being Marine, which you kind of need to be. So after I left the Marine Corps, we went back to Kansas, and that's when my first wife and I decided to separate. After I had found out that she had actually lied to me about being on birth control, which is why we had 2 kids. That was not fun. Tried to get in the Air Force, and that was just taking too long. So I joined the Air National Guard and did some other stuff. That's actually what took me to Virginia. I moved out to DC. As I was doing intel work for the Air National Guard, there's a big Air Force base out in Virginia, right? Langley Air Force Base down in Hampton Roads. So I was going out there all the time to do work. And I'm like, well, let me just go ahead and throw my resume up on the internet and see what I can find. Picked up a job in DC and moved out there. Right.
Man,
my life has been a lot.
It's been a ride, man. You know, it's funny. It's not funny, but a lot of the guys, I guess you got to learn to laugh at that kind of shit, right? Because otherwise, you know, what else are you going to do? But a lot of the guys in this space are, one, really smart, and 2, had a lot of shit happen to them.
Yes.
like a lot of shit happened to them, man. And so they're really coming from places of authority.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing. There's a phrase like experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And guys like us have a lot of experience, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Like one of the things that I get jealous of guys who are coming in here when they're young and they're like their 20s and their early 30s and stuff. I'm like, you have got like a 20-year head start on me. I freaking hate you. Yeah. It's like, if only I had woken up back then. But then I sit there and I realize like, oh wait, I woke up and I started getting all this stuff unlocked when I'm 40s, when I've already got a professional career, when I already know how to make money.
Right.
When I'm already established, I'm like, I am freaking deadly now. Yeah. Like, I don't have to build a solid base. I got that thing unlocked. Like, it's just like unlocking me and like allowing myself to have the things that I really want. Like, now we're on game. Now it's completely different ball game.
Well, the fact that you were able to build all that stuff while still having all this, you know, like it's when you get rid of that shit, it's just like you know, you're moving at 1,000 miles. Yeah.
So ready.
I don't know John personally, but I know his story and stuff like that. And the fact that he was able to do as much as he was able to do with all that shit, all that baggage was a pretty extraordinary thing. So.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where a lot of guys who are very capable, they're very smart, they're very talented. Like, you just can't hold that stuff back, right? No. Your mind takes the path of least resistance. Okay. So if you're really capable of something, it's not going to try and mess with you in that space because it's too much effort. So it'll screw with you in other ways. So John's very sharp, hell of a marketer, great at business. So that part of his life works pretty well. Mine screws with him in other ways, like in the relationship side of thing. On his, he's always talked about how he's had issues with his weight and stuff like that, and his health and his body, right? So it's like, I'm going to leave this piece alone because that's too hard. I'm going to mess up with you here and here, right? And I've dealt with all kinds of guys who are like 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs who their business life is freaking on point and their personal lives are a complete mess,
right?
Because they're still carrying around that trauma, because they're still carrying all that baggage, because they've got all these wounds that they haven't dealt with and haven't healed. And it's just not showing up in the area that they're good at. It's showing up in all the other areas of your life.
Do you think it's an element of sometimes willing yourself to be successful in one area just because knowing in the back of your head that this other shit is not right?
Mm-hmm. I think there's definitely part of that. I think there's definitely a compensation piece.
Right.
I've had some clients where it's like, oh, well, I'm not dating women because I'm concentrating on being excellent and building my business. Like, no, the business is the thing you're using to distract yourself from the fact that you can't get a woman.
Right.
And you're good at this. So it feels good to do the thing that you're really good at. So you can like pat yourself on the back. It's like, oh, I'm chasing excellence, not women. And that'll happen eventually. And yada, yada, yada. It's a wonderful excuse. It's a beautiful excuse. It's a great justification. It's also a wonderful way to avoid doing the work on the things that are actually important to you.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there's benefits to that, right? Because once you get one of these guys who's incredibly successful business-wise and you get the rest of the head trash taken care of and they can live life that they want to, well, then everything else falls into place really fast. Because they've got all that capacity. They just haven't been able to use it in those other areas of their life. It's just been locked in one space. Like, this is the only place you get to be that.
Right. What do you do with guys say, I talked to a therapist once and he was talking about wires being crossed. You ever run in a guy that, like, for all other reasons, like if everything was straight, they'd be going 1,000 miles an hour, but there's so many sort of different wires crossing so many different messages. I think
that's every client that I work with. Yeah, that's every client. So the way I explained it in a webinar last night I did for John for his Inner Game summit. Basically, think about it as a set of scales in the back of your head, weighing positives and negatives. Okay.
Mm.
And on the one hand side, you got the positives. On the other side, you got the negatives. Often, what we do is we put a bunch of positives on the one side of the scale, hoping it's going to tip the scales. But if there's stuff on the other side of the scale, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I don't deserve, right? I'm powerless, I'm weak, whatever sort of story you're telling yourself, then that's going to outweigh all the positives you can throw on there, right? Guys who have dealt with like severe depression, been in some really dark places, whether they've considered ending things or just considered giving up. On the negative side, there's also often this thing about like, if you do this, you will die.
Right.
How much weight do you have to throw on the other side of the scale, right? So,
but if you do what, you will die. The positive thing. Sorry.
Yeah, if you like try,
right.
If you like really put it out there, really go for what you want, and you come up short, then it kind of proves all the negative stuff you think about yourself is true.
Right.
And then down that dark road you go again, and that's where you start wanting to give up. That's where you start thinking about ending things. Because I've been there before? Like that survival mechanism is like, I cannot let you go anywhere near there.
Right. I had read a book. I don't know if you ever read this, heard of this book called Soul Murder.
No, I haven't heard that one.
I want to say it was written in the 1989 is when it came out. And then they did the second one was in 1999, 10 years later or whatever. And Soul Murder talks about sort of childhood trauma,
sure,
parents using the children to fulfill needs they didn't get met necessarily. And so what it does is it caps the child's capacity for joy. And one of the things it says is, just like what you were saying, is they won't try for fear of annihilation. Actually,
yes,
there's a feeling of terror of being murdered and killed.
Yes,
if they try.
Yeah, that's definitely, and I don't see that's not often what happens. That's usually an issue when you've already been in some really dark, depressive places. Right. Okay, because I've got guys that have been through it and they've just been in that space, and they have stories that you're telling yourself about the things that happen in your life. Like, this means that I can't ever be who I want to be, because if I be who I want to be, then I'm gonna get murdered. Right. Or I'm gonna get punished. Right. Or if I do this, it proves that I'm bad and wrong and worthless and never going to deserve. And so there's no point. Right. And so you're talking about wires being crossed. Think of it instead of like programs being written wrong. Right. Where you got a program that's designed to do a certain thing, and it's designed to help you out, because fundamentally every single thing your mind does is designed to create a positive benefit in your life of some kind. Even if it's screwing with the things you consciously want, like, it's still trying to help you, right? That whole like not allowing yourself to be yourself, because if you do, you get murdered. That's trying to keep you alive. That's a good thing. That's fundamentally a good thing, right? Is it getting in the way of the thing you want? Yes, absolutely. Is it trying to do something good for you? Yes, absolutely. It's just that the solution your mind has chosen doesn't actually accomplish what you really want, or it prevents you from having things you want that are important, right? One thing that I've dealt with a lot is guys who have been, in those environments where being seen, everything they do, they get punished for, right? There's often this tendency to like want to hide. You can't see me, you can't hurt me. You can't see me, then I can't do anything wrong. So you can't punish me, right? Cool. Hide, stay safe, makes sense. Hide, you never get what you want. Hide, you can't connect. Right? Hide, you can't actually be out in the world and experience anything. Right? So that hiding kept you safe, but the hiding is also now hurting you because you can't actually live. Right. So you end up in this survival mode your entire life, where you're never actually able to live. You're never actually able to live the life you want to live, because you're always hiding in order to protect yourself. Right. Well, that's just death by 1,000 cuts in a different way. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a solution. It chose a solution as the best one it could have at the time. That thing worked because you're still breathing. So there's no reason to get rid of it. It's just keeping you from doing stuff that you really want right now. And so finding out what this is all about and getting you a new solution that allows you to do the things you want, that helps you live the life you want, like that fundamentally is what my work is all about. Figure out what's holding you back and change it to something that helps you be who you want to be.
Yeah, that hit me hard, man, when you were talking about like sort of being in survival mode and not actually going out and exposing yourself and not connecting. And that's actually why I became an actor. It was like, because I could hide behind these characters. If somebody didn't like something, there was like, oh, that was the character that said it, I didn't say it, or
exactly
X, Y, and Z. But then I would realize what happened was I started to hit a wall, and I couldn't act I couldn't access parts of myself that I needed to actually do the work and to grow and to expand. And so I was like, wait, something is off here.
100%.
Talk to me about, so these messages that you were talking about, you're getting these messages or these codes that are incorrect. Now, to what extent is the negative mind just part of the human condition, because we need to sort of figure out whether or not there's a saber-toothed tiger in the bushes, or is it conditioning from being raised? What has been your experience when you're working?
So I never assume that these are messages and programs that have been installed. Okay. One of the differences between me and a lot of people is that you are influenced by your environment, but nobody's giving these programs to you. You're actually creating them yourself. These are conclusions that you're coming up with on your own.
As a result of what you're experiencing?
As a result of what you're experiencing, right?
Okay.
Your unconscious mind is always trying to make sense of the world, always trying to figure out how to freaking navigate the world you're in, right? So it's going to come up with some explanation and some story about what's going on, what it means, who you are, how you have to move through the world as a result, right? So you're a kid and you're trying, nothing you do works. Like no matter what you do, you get punished, right? Okay, so you figure after a while, and maybe it's not the things that I'm doing that are wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
Especially as a child, like you're incredibly egocentric. It's all about you. Right. So it can't possibly be anybody else. It can't be their freaking fault. It has to be yours.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden there's this deep sense like, okay, there has to be something wrong with me. And it has to be really bad because I don't even freaking I can't find it. I don't know what it is. So it's got to be really bad. Well, that takes you down the road. It's like, well, if there's something wrong with me, then I don't really deserve anything good because there's something wrong with me. I have to hide myself because if anybody saw me, they'd see that thing that's wrong with me. Right. Maybe I have to pretend to be somebody else in order to be accepted. Because if I show them me, they can't possibly accept me because there's nothing wrong with me. So I have to figure out who they want me to be so that they can accept me, right? And of course, if you do that, what you get in return is what they think the person you're pretending to be wants and needs, not what you want and needs. So you still don't get what you want, right? But at the same time, it makes sense. Nothing I do works. No matter what I do, it doesn't work. It's got to be me that's wrong. I can't get it right. Something wrong with me. Right. And it makes total sense. And you figure that you're coming up with these conclusions and you're drawing these conclusions when you're like 4, 6.
Right.
You don't understand how the world works.
Right.
And so it's not that your parents said, oh, you're a bad person. There's something wrong with you. It's like, no, you came up with that on your own. Most likely. Tons of evidence throughout your life. Makes sense, right? You can say, well, this is wrong. This is wrong. I did this wrong and I mess up here and yada, yada, yada. And so you've got all this evidence that seems to support that, right? But it's just a story. It's just one interpretation of the events that are going on in your life, right? And the problem is that once you create one of these stories in the back of your mind, your unconscious mind doesn't judge true and false based on objective fact. It doesn't. It judges it based on, does what I'm seeing match what I already believe?
Wow.
Right? So if you feel like there's something wrong with you and somebody comes up to you and say, man, you're a fuck up. You're like, well, yep, that matches. I'm a fuck up. So you add that to the stack of proof that you're a fuck up and there's something wrong with you, right? But some girl comes up to you and says, man, you're amazing. You're like, what's wrong with this one?
What do you want?
What do you want? It's like this. It's like there has to be something up because that cannot possibly be true because there's something wrong with me.
Right.
So you flat out ignore that. Can't possibly accept it because it's wrong because it doesn't match what you already believe inside. Right. And so as we grow up and we understand the world better, we understand the world differently, right? We start hanging out in spaces like this, learning from guys that have been through all kinds of stuff and see the world different. It's like, okay, cool. Intellectually, consciously, I can understand that it wasn't about me when I was growing up. Parents were just a mess. Taking their shit out on me because they had their own baggage and they couldn't do anything different. Fair enough. But that intellectual not understanding doesn't change that belief in the back of your head. Because your back of your head says, well, no, it can't possibly be that. It had to be me. So I'm going to ignore all that stuff you're just learning. Just ignore it. I'm going to keep on believing that there's something wrong with me. Which is why things like hypnosis for me are such a powerful tool to create that rapid change, because it gives us that direct access to your unconscious mind. So we can actually put it on pause and say, okay, hey, I know that you believe this when you're younger, but here's all this stuff you didn't see back then. Here's all these things you didn't understand. And because of that, maybe those things that you saw don't mean that there's something wrong with you. Maybe there's really nothing wrong with you at all. Maybe you're just in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong people. It was all their stuff. And they were the thing that was wrong. Right? Well, if that's the case, if there's nothing wrong with you, there never really was, well, then you would deserve good things, right? Because there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
If there's nothing wrong with you, well, then there'd be no reason to hide. There'd be no reason to pretend to be anybody else because there's nothing wrong with you. Right? Well, that's going to take you down a very different path in life than if you always have to hide who you are because there's something wrong with you. Right? You're going to be able to do the things you want to be able to get what you want. You're going to be able to show people who you are. You'll actually be able to connect on a real level and be vulnerable and be open. Have healthy relationships for once in your life with actually healthy people as opposed to broken up people that are just as bad off as you are. Right?
Right.
Just because nothing changed in your life. None of the events changed in your life. You're not saying that your parents were good people and they loved you. No, they were a mess,
Right.
but it didn't have anything to do with you. That story, just changing that story of what that stuff means, the interpretation of those things, changing that story about who you are and how the world works, changes everything. And it doesn't take long. Once you're able to figure out what those stories are and do the work to actually figure out why you're doing the things you're doing, it does not take much work to fix that. It does not take much work to get you on a much better path. Think about what happens when somebody reads Irrational Male for the first time. Eyes are up. It's like, oh,
Right.
so that's how that works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they start acting differently almost immediately. May take some time to figure out how to do things in that new way because it's an entirely new framework to behave on. Right? But if you've already done all the work to understand how the world works and you've just been holding yourself back because this like messed up story in the back of your head that you can't do it, and you fix this, well, now you get to do all this other stuff that you've already learned.
Right.
Right? It's nothing holding you back from anymore. So that's what I do. I go find those stories. I go find those weights. I help you get new stories and new interpretations of the events in your life so that you can live life in a different way.
And to me, and I said this before, and you obviously alluded to this, is once, if you're the sort of person that, because there are people that they just completely give up on life, they become drug addicts, alcoholics, whatever. Some take permanent solutions to temporary problems.
They do.
If you're the sort of person that has even had a modicum of success with all that stuff on, I mean, you're a really strong, powerful individual. And the minute you release those things, I mean, the sky's the limit at this point. You and I had a session, obviously, and there was a lot of stuff going on and stuff that I didn't even see. Obviously, I can't, I can't look at myself necessarily. Can you walk us through what hypnosis actually is? If we can get an idea of what it is that you're actually doing during a hypnosis session. And I cut you off. You were saying something. I apologize.
Well, no. So hypnosis fundamentally is just an altered state of mind that allows us to have that direct access to your unconscious mind. That's all it is. Okay. We get there through focus, relaxation, letting go. Right. Just kind of like, it's kind of like a guided meditation whenever we're doing work together. Give you a series of things to do. You do the things, we get you down to that level. Right. So start here in your conscious mind, go into that meditative state. That's like one level lower. And then we take you another level lower, deeper. Okay. Normally, there's a principle we have in hypnosis called the critical factor. It's kind of the wall between your conscious and your unconscious mind. Right. So basically a filter, like the world's best BS filter. Like that's that part of your mind that's judging true and false based on, does this match what's already in the back of my head? Right. Well, the entire point of hypnosis is to kind of like drop that wall. So you're not dealing with that filter anymore. The judgment goes away. Which means you get that direct access to your unconscious mind. Now, part of the reason why it's so hard to look at yourself and do the self-examination is that your unconscious mind gets to decide what to show your conscious mind. So you say, show me the problem. And it's like, I don't really want to do that. Doesn't show you. Right. Or there's a lot of people who, I've dealt with where like they have a hard time remembering things when they're growing up because their unconscious mind is like, nope, that's a whole mess of stuff. Like it's traumatic. It's like, you don't want to see that. I'm not gonna let you see that because I'm gonna hurt you. So I'm not gonna see it. I'm not gonna show it to you. Right. So it can be even hard to get the data you would need to be able to figure out what's going on. Right. And a lot of times as guys, we want an answer. We want some kind of freaking explanation for why we're doing the things we do. And so we hear all these theories like attachment theory, and we hear about like inner child at work and inner family systems and freaking horoscopes and whatever the hell. Right. And we're like, okay, cool. Mom was terrible to me and didn't love me enough as a kid. So I've got this anxious attachment style. And so that's why I am the way I am. Cool. Makes sense. Right. But we're drawing those conclusions based on the limited amount of data that we have access to in our conscious minds. Right. Whereas our unconscious minds are drawing conclusions based on everything that's happened.
Right.
And it's doing it in a very different way. It's not using logic and reason. It's got its own like little unconscious mind, emotional symbolism, metaphor system that it uses. So it's drawing very different kinds of conclusions from a much bigger set of data. So often what we think is the problem and what we think is going on and what our unconscious minds are creating for us, what's actually going on back there in terms of the story, it's telling itself about who we are, how the world works, the problem it needs to solve, why it chose this particular solution, often completely different things. Now, I've had guys walk into sessions like, this is the thing. I'm like, okay, cool. And we get them in there. It's like, that's not the thing. That is 100% not the thing. right? So when we're doing a session, the structure is very much a situation of like, okay, we'll spend 5-10 minutes at the beginning making sure we're on the same page of what we're actually going to go after that day. Like, what actually are we looking for and what actually we're looking to change, okay? To make sure we actually understand what we're doing that day. Then it's a little process of getting you in hypnosis, guiding you through that process so you can get down to that level of your mind. We can make that connection to your unconscious mind. And so you stop judging things and stop trying to get things right and things like that. And we can just like let your unconscious mind start telling the story it needs to tell.
Right.
And then we just drop that in that question. It's like, okay, cool. You're hiding from the world. Not letting the world see who you are, not allowing yourself to connect. Great. Show me the problem you're trying to solve by doing that. Right? That's the solution to a problem. Show me the problem you're trying to solve. And just have it walk us through a few examples in your life of whatever that problem is. And the thing is that I don't care where things started. I really don't. The question is, why are you still doing this to yourself? Because if you're still doing it, there's still a problem that needs to be solved today. Right? Because if it's just a thing back then and you stop, you don't have to solve that problem anymore, you'd be done with that behavior. You wouldn't need it anymore. Right? Which means there's still something happening today that your mind needs to compensate for or needs to solve by hiding it. Right? Cool. So just have it give us a few examples. And I don't care how important or how momentous or how critical they are in your life. They could be the most innocuous thing, as long as it's a nice, clear example that tells the story. Use this example all the time of like, hey, you're 6 years old, you're hanging out on the playground. Little Susie runs up to you and calls you a poopy head. So you figure you're hideous, you're ugly, nobody's ever going to love you, right? Because you're a poopy head. Makes sense. You're 6, right?
Sure,
you're 6, right? How the hell are you supposed to know any different, right?
It's devastating.
It's devastating, absolutely devastating, crushing you, wounds you for life, right? But then you grow up and you realize there's this thing called flirting, right? Little boys start running around on the playground punching little girls, not because we hate them, but because we're trying to get their attention and we're a little bit stupid back then. Right? Well, maybe little Susie wanted your attention because she liked you, called you poopy because you'd heard it, thought it was hilarious.
Right.
Trying to get your attention, right? She was trying to flirt. Only she's just as stupid as we are as little boys because ain't nobody told us any of this stuff back then, right?
Yeah.
It's going on, right? Well, if that's the case, then that means you're so awesome that you make little girls just as stupid as little boys.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's going to take you down a very different path. You're not hideous and ugly. No, you're awesome. You're so awesome that women go stupid trying to get your attention.
Right.
It's a very different interpretation, very different.
That's 100%.
Same thing. It's the same exact event happened. It's just being able to see it in a different light with different perspective and different information and different understanding. Taking all that adult understanding of the world back to those days and back to those events to say, okay, sure, this is what I thought happened then. This is what I thought it meant then. Here's all these other things that I couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't incorporate back then. And because of all this stuff, it means something very different than what I thought it did. I'm not hideous and ugly. I'm freaking awesome. And people want to be around me so much that little girls are trying to go up and get my attention by saying stupid shit.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, there's no reason to hide.
You ever heard, I don't know if it's a parable, but it's like an old story of the two sons and the alcoholic father?
No, don't think I do.
There's two brothers. I think they're twins. And one twin is a raging alcoholic. He's a complete loser. He's homeless. And the other one is like a millionaire, super successful. And they were asked, why did you become an alcoholic? And the guy said, because my father is an alcoholic. And the other guy's like, well, why'd you become a millionaire? Why'd you become so successful? He goes, because my father was an alcoholic and he was a loser. Right? Two brothers, same environment.
Same environment. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really fundamentally all it is.
Right. It's
just choosing how you're going to respond to events in your life, choosing what story you want to tell about what that stuff means. But unfortunately, we don't necessarily, our unconscious mind is doing this for us on its own.
Yeah.
By itself, without any real conscious input and based on what we can understand at the time. Right. So when you're going through a lot of really traumatic stuff when you're a kid, when you're going through a lot of tough stuff as a kid, you don't really understand the world very well. So the solutions and the understandings you're going to come up with back then tend to be pretty limited. Right. And again, egocentric. So it's probably going to be all about you. Right. And that's perfectly normal, perfectly understandable, exactly how it's supposed to work. And your mind is going to keep using those programs because guess what? You're still breathing. So they're obviously working. Right. Your unconscious mind exists to keep you breathing. Doesn't really care if you're happy. In a lot of ways, it would rather keep you in a miserable situation it understands how to deal with.
Right.
Than let you move to someplace that it can't understand how to protect you and help you navigate.
Absolutely.
Right. Because at least if you're there, it knows what to do. So a lot of guys I see that are really stuck, it's kind of like they're stuck in this little cage
Mm,
because that's the only place they know is safe.
right. Right.
Even though everything they want is all out there, it's like, this is a place that's safe. This is the
Right.
only place I can really be. This is the only place I can control. So I'm going to stay in here and I'm going to make it as comfortable as possible to be in here. Right. So a lot of times what you see with drugs and alcohol and things like that are ways to make your miserable life tolerable,
Mm,
ways to make your stay in prison tolerable.
right.
Right. Rather than a way to sabotage yourself. It's like, no, I'm stuck in here because I'm supposed to be in here and safe, but it's miserable. So I'm going to make it as comfortable as possible to stay in prison. Right.
Yeah. And every time you do that, you drink or you get high or whatever, trying to cover that stuff up. It's like another layer on top of the thing that you need to get to in order
It's
to be
more
able
and
to
more
solve your
proof
problem.
that staying in that prison is the right place for you to be.
Right.
Yep.
I think about sort of if you were telling yourself these stories or whatever when you were
Mhm.
younger, and maybe somebody even did implant these stories, but
Maybe.
eventually when you leave, you end up imprisoning yourself. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
sort of whatever your environment was happening, somebody may have done it to you, but then
Mhm.
you eventually end up being the jailer.
Yes, you 100% do. And to be entirely honest, like that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. What I've been dealing with for the past year is realizing how much I'd been holding myself back.
Right.
Realizing how much damage and how much harm I caused myself over the freaking 45, 46 years of my life, just keeping myself alive and just helping myself deal with the stuff that was happening in my life. Right. I did a session with another guy today to work on exactly this kind of thing of
Mm,
being stuck and trying to deal with all these old wounds. Right.
mhm.
It doesn't go away just because you recognize it's there. You have
Right.
to go in and do the deeper work to actually do the corrective stuff and find a way to negotiate with those parts of yourself that are doing this and find a new solution that they are actually on board with, right? Because they're trying to help you and they're not going to stop trying to help you until there's a better way to help you.
Right.
Until those parts of your mind that are doing this stuff agree, yeah, we need to do something different.
Do you think, two questions? Do you think
Sure.
though that there is a part of us that does understand, maybe doesn't understand it completely, but has an idea of perhaps where we need to go? And if that is the case, do you think it makes it easier to actually peer into that when they have someone like you, sort of there, like you're like a unconscious Sherpa, trying to guide them out of that?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Right.
So, one way to think about it is like there's this idea called parts therapy or internal family systems where like you've got different parts of yourself that have
Right.
different functions, right? So these parts of yourself can be in conflict. Like part A wants to do this thing, part B wants to do this thing. I want to run out and explore and have fun and live and succeed. No, you got to stay in prison because that's the only place you're safe,
Right.
right? So you're not going to come to me to do any work if you're satisfied with your life and you like how things are going, because there's no problem to solve,
Right.
right?
Even if you're in the gutter, even if you're in the gutter.
Even if you got if like that, if you're happy there, if you're comfortable there, if you're not ready to move, if you're not ready to make any changes, you're not going to come see a guy like me
Of course, yeah.
because you're not ready to do the work,
Right.
whether that's consciously, whether or not like you feel safe enough on an unconscious level, right? You're just not there yet.
Sure.
So there has to be a part of you that wants something different than what you have right now and wants to live in a different way than you are right now before you ever want to do this work. But as long as there is, as long as you do want to change, as long as you're willing to do some extra work, as long as you're willing to take a look at stuff that's uncomfortable and painful, that you don't necessarily want to admit about yourself, that you're not happy about, that you can't really accept about yourself. Once you're able to do that, once you're willing to at least take that risk, yes, all the doors open. All the doors open because your mind is not going to allow you to do this kind of work until it believes it is ready to actually address and sort of tackle this stuff.
Hmm.
Right. Where, like for me, I've been doing work for the past year and I thought I'd peel back all the freaking layers of the onion. I thought I'd had it. And then something came up 2 weeks ago on Valentine's Day where it's like, fuck. Like
Yeah.
there's still this like massive thing right there on the bottom that's been like sitting there all along that I couldn't freaking see. And that's the point where it says, pops and says, hi, you need to talk. it's like, God damn it. And like to be honest with you, it broke me for a bit. Like I spent the entire fucking night just like fucking bawling in pain. Like it was not a pleasant experience when that thing came up.
Wow.
But it was finally time and it was finally ready. I was finally in a space where I could do that work.
Sure.
Right. Like it was time. It's like, okay, now I'm safe enough. Now I've done enough work. Now I've checked a number of other boxes ahead of that, right? Fixed a number of other things ahead of that. So now it's safe for me to see this part of me that's been hiding for so long. Now it's safe for me to actually work with and start talking to that part and do what I needed to do to fix that. right? Which is a lot of the work I did today. A lot of the work I've been doing over the past couple weeks is to try and like, okay, now that I see this big honking thing, now let me go ahead and do the work to fix that thing. Because until now, I wasn't able to see it because I wasn't ready. I hadn't done the preparatory work. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't safe enough. Like whatever it happened to be, wasn't the right time yet. So in a lot of ways, a lot of this work can be just like peeling back layers of an onion. It's like, I see this problem now. I want to fix this. Okay, great. Do that work.
Right.
Do all this work, get as deep as we can, clear out as much stuff. Great. And you're going around in life. It's like, oh, wow. Now there's this other thing. We need to do some work on this.
Yeah.
Right. Because you see more the farther you go. You see more. The more you interact with the world as a new person, the more feedback you're able to get, the more you're able to see within yourself as well.
Yeah, that was something that I was going to bring up before. It seems like it's a feedback experiential thing, and you almost need to put yourself in a different environment or expose yourself to a different story in order to be able to do it. But in order to do that, you sort of have to start telling yourself a different story. So it's kind of like this.
It's like, think about it as like, okay, you're in a cell in your prison. Okay.
Yeah.
So you do the work, you open the door of the cell. Sweet. I am now out of my cell. I'm no longer stuck in a cage. You step outside. It's like, shit, I'm in a prison.
Right.
So then you do it. Okay, let me get out of this prison brackets. Okay, great. Now I'm out of this prison block. Now I'm out of this set of like 80 cells. Great. I'm still in prison, but at least I can see the fence.
Right.
You do the rest like, okay, cool. So I go and I open the fence of the prison. It's like, great. I'm outside there. Great. I'm still in the state. Can't leave the state. Right. So it's like, as you open these doors and get access to more and more, well, number one, it's generally a much better environment for you to play in. Right. So even while you're doing the work, even though you're still stuck in some ways, even though you don't necessarily have access to full freedom, just like flip one switch and you're 100% good, every single step of the way, you're able to live a much better life because you have access to more and more. Right. And as you go out there and in those worlds, you explore the borders of what's possible for you, see where the fence is. That's going to show you, it's like, okay, cool. So there's no boundaries over here and over here, but like over here, there's this thing that I can't touch, that I can't go to. There's a fence there. There's a wall there.
Right.
Started poking around. It's like, oh, do I actually want to go there? Well, maybe not. Right. Maybe it's very important for you to go there in order to do what you want. In which case, okay, cool. Now you know where to go poking around and find your next bit of work.
A couple things. So you know who Jay Waller is? I
do.
He talks about expanding consciousness.
Sure.
Like, and that always made sense to me. So I guess he's talking about, I mean, I don't know him personally, but what I interpreted from that is like, as you go out into the world, things get larger and larger. You can sort of see more. The fog of war isn't as obtrusive is not the right word, but you know what I mean? As sort of,
you can see more and more. Yeah.
You can see more.
One thing that I've seen some guys get in a trap with is a lot of guys are like really into psychedelics or really into self-help and stuff like that. Really into spirituality. I think it's like outstanding. I'm going to go all the way out there, which means they're also not looking in here.
Right.
Let me go ahead and expand my consciousness and like delve into these like psychedelic worlds and start talking to aliens. Like, cool. Yeah. How's your life? Now, Jay Waller's living a great life, right? Yeah. So he's probably done a lot of deep internal work too. Yeah. And a lot of that expanding your consciousness also goes along with taking a look at the deep stuff inside and fixing that. You know, things like psychedelics and stuff like that. A lot of it is really used to look inside to find what's holding you back from being able to experience that other stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But that's only if you're using it to do that kind of work. A lot of guys use it more recreationally.
Right.
Or they're doing it in ways like, oh, I'm going to have this cool experience that's going to open my mind. It's like, cool. It's open. Now what? Yeah. Great big open mind, able to see so much more. Now what? Have you actually fixed anything? No. So instead of like actually doing the work you want to do, instead of distracting yourself with video games and alcohol, now you're just a trip addict.
Right.
Or self-help.
You've replaced it with something else. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And oh, by the way, since it's got the spiritual component and higher consciousness and everything else, you get to pat yourself on the back for being addicted to it.
Right.
Because you're evolved, you're higher level now.
Right. I find that there's a lot of success porn out there and sort of self-help porn, and I was into that for a long time, and then I had read like 100 books on that shit, and I was like, my life's not much better. I was like, this shit, what's going on with this stuff, man? This ain't working. So The other question that I wanted to ask you is, are you healing yourself by healing other men? Like when you're working with someone, does it give you insight into yourself? I mean, obviously you're focused on them, you're helping them, but
Sure.
what is the effect on yourself when you're actually healing these guys?
Oh, definitely. Like one of the reasons why I'm as good at helping other guys is because I've been through a lot.
Right.
But working through their issues often lets me see stuff in me that I couldn't see otherwise.
Mm.
Like one of the things that I was running into last year is what my next tattoo I'm going to get is a tattoo on my chest that says "I am alive, 7/29/21." Because it wasn't until July 29th, 2021 that I actually wanted to be alive. I actually freaking wanted it and felt like there was stuff in the world. Yeah, 45 years old. Not a pleasant realization to have, to realize that you've basically been borderline suicidal for 45 years.
Get out, man.
Swear to God. Swear to God. I had this very powerful experience. I'm sitting there on the couch hanging out. It's like, man, I love being alive. This is amazing. It's great. Oh, fuck. This is the first time I can remember feeling this way. First second time I can remember feeling like life had something to offer me and that I could actually have and enjoy it.
Wow.
Which is not a pleasant realization to have. But cool. Outstanding. Now I want to be alive, right? Pack my stuff up, get the hell out of DC because it's not the right place for me. Move down to Austin, unpack my stuff, get myself a great apartment right in the middle of town, right in the middle of everything. And I'm sitting around the apartment with my thumb on my butt. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like, I want to live. I fucking want to do this stuff. This is like, this is where I'm at. I want to live. Like, what the hell? And I did a session for a guy, and he had been through this issue where he'd been in some really dark places. Thought about suicide in the past, right? Thought about ending his life. And realizing that it wasn't safe for him to try anything, right? Because if he tried and failed, previous loser, right? I realized I was like, fuck. If I go out there and really go for my life and really try and play on the level I want to, and I miss, maybe I didn't deserve it after all. Maybe it wasn't actually good enough after all.
Right.
And that ran through my head. I'm like, son of a gun. Like I'm doing the same thing this kid did. Still stuck because it's not safe for me to try because I've been in those dark places. So then I had to go back and do some more work. Like, all right, cool. Let me fix that thing. Great. Do some work in October, November. I'm like, outstanding. Now it's safe for me to try. Perfect. Outstanding. I spent a little bit of time doing some self-soothing and just like taking care of myself because I've been miserable for 46 years. Kind of have some making up to do. Yeah. So there's a lot of pizza and ice cream and fried chicken and women. Right.
Nice.
It's like, you know what? This is just, I don't care about my diet right now. This is just making me feel good. I don't care. Right.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year, I'm like, all right, new year, time to get a crank in. Let's go. And still finding myself not really doing what I need to do. I'm like, what the hell? And then I had this realization a couple weeks ago that there's this part of myself that felt like I was bad, wrong, undeserving. Like I was destructive and dangerous by nature. It's like, well, shit. Well, if I'm destructive and dangerous by nature, I can't let myself run around in the world free.
Right.
So I'm going to wreck shit. I'm going to cause harm. If I'm bad and I'm wrong by nature, then I can't actually deserve good things. Sure, I can go get it. I can have the capacity to go get it. I can be 100% capable of going and getting it, but I can't let myself have it because I don't deserve it. And I can't let myself leverage into my capabilities if I'm dangerous and destructive by nature.
Right.
So then I was still stuck not doing it. I'm like, God damn it. So had to schedule some more sessions with guys and start doing some more work on that. And part of that work I did today, I was like, oh, well, the reason I'm dangerous and destructive is because, you know, I've been hurt so much. And part of me freaking wanted revenge.
Right.
Like,
Right.
You all for doing this to me. Right.
Right.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Perhaps we should do some work to resolve that. Okay, cool.
Let's.
Perhaps we should do some work.
Now that you're in
that.
Texas,
It's like, okay, cool. Like maybe we should do some work on that, right? So I don't want to lay waste to the freaking planet because I've been hurt before. Like that's a good thing, right?
They got a lot of guns in Texas.
Yeah, well, my former Marine, right? Like,
there you go.
Blow stuff up for a living. Like, yeah, I can do some stuff, right? I'm really good at what I do. That's not necessarily a good thing for the people on the receiving end, right? Right. So it's like when you start realizing making those connections, it's like, oh, well, no wonder I didn't let myself leverage all this stuff. Because if I have this part of me that like wants to lay waste to everything for what's happened to me, like I can't let that sucker run around doing what it wants to.
Right.
Which means I can't let myself leverage all the talents and skills that I have. Even if I know I can play at this like really high level, I can't let myself do that because setting myself loose to do that means setting this part of me loose that wants to freaking burn the world.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. Cool. So now that I've done some of that work, still probably have a little bit more to do. Okay, now I'm feeling a lot more comfortable. The idea of putting myself out there and doing this stuff. Now I feel much more like I deserve it. In addition to just being able to have it, having the capacity to create it, now I actually deserve it. Because there's really like nothing wrong with me. There's nothing bad. There's nothing wrong about me. I'm just wrong place, wrong time, shitty environment growing up, like, is what it is, right? But that doesn't mean anything about me. It's not about me. Go in and take a look at what those stories are, why they're there, what they're trying to do to help me, right? Well, if I've been hurt, if I got to protect myself, well, then having a raging beast that is going to freaking maul anything that comes near, pretty handy.
Yeah.
Very handy.
Yeah.
If there's a party who's like, you screw with me, I'm going to freaking lay waste to everything that moves. That's a handy thing to have around if you have to protect yourself because you've been hurt so much.
Right.
Cool. Right. But maybe we need to do things a little bit differently now.
Yeah.
That I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I'm not 4 or 12 years old anymore. It's like, I can probably do things a little bit differently now that I'm older and wiser.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. That's all I'm going to say is I hear you, man, on that for sure. Well, there's, you ever read Homer's The Iliad?
Yes.
The Rage of Achilles. Every time, like that, when I read that, I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "This is hitting a little too close to home right now, man." So
yeah. There's this phrase I used for a long time, like "fuck with me and mine, and I end you."
Yeah,
like that's like, oh no, you're done. You pissed off the wrong guy.
Yeah, and that's in all of us as men, right? Like that thing, and
absolutely.
Today, I don't. It's sort of like quelched, or it's sort of they want to sort of.
Well, let me put it this way: that capacity for violence and destruction is kind of an inherent part of masculinity, of being a man, right?
Yeah.
The difference between a raging beast and a warrior is control.
Right.
It's control. It's discernment. You take 2 boxers in the ring, and one guy is just like freaking angry. He's a big old freaking tank. And he's just like, rah, and just freaking comes out swinging, and wild haymakers everywhere. And you got the other guy on the other side, just like bobbing, weaving, wait, bam, freaking nails him, right? The guy who knows how to control and direct and harness that capacity for violence and destruction is the one who wins.
Yes.
Right? The reason why we idolize like special forces guys is because they have this massive capacity to just freaking destroy, and like massive capacity to do all kinds of stuff. And they're the most controlled, chilled, deliberate people on the planet. Like that control and deliberate, precise, definiteness of purpose of like, I'm going to go do this. It's like, I'm going to make this thing right here happen. That is what makes them so freaking dangerous. It's the purpose and the intent and the deliberateness with which they apply that violence and that destruction and that drive and that primal freaking energy of like, right? When they take that sucker and they say, I want all this, I'm going to go right there. Right? It's like if you got a 15-pound weight, 15-pound like plate, right? And you put it on your chest, like it's 15 pounds, right? But you take a spike, it's a very, very fine point that weighs 15 pounds, and you put that point right on your chest. It's like, it's going to go ahead and sink right on it. Right? Because it's got all that weight behind it focused on a very, very, very small point.
Right.
Same stuff, same amount of weight. Big flat surface, going everywhere, or very specific, very single focus, very minute point. I'm going to do this, which gets the job done, right? And so it's that control, it's that becoming the warrior, right? It's becoming that soldier, it's becoming that person who can deliberately harness and direct that power. That's what makes you truly, truly capable and truly, truly dangerous.
Right.
So how do you personally take that and hone it in? You must have learned how to do it definitely in the military as a Marine, right? Every yeah, go ahead.
So part of it is, martial arts, right? And I've done karate, I've done judo, I've done aikido, I've done Filipino martial arts, I've done a little bit of boxing here and there. And that very much it forces you in an environment where you are going up against somebody else who wants to hurt you. Right. And so now it's like, okay, now there is actual threat. Right. And it's capable people who know how to use violence. It's like, okay, I got to learn how to use that stuff very, very quickly. And that's those environments where you figure out very quickly, you can't just go, go beast mode on somebody. Because anybody with any skill is going to take a guy like that apart. right? It's a very visceral lesson of, if you are not in control, if you are not skilled, if you're not using with purpose, you lose to somebody who is. So you start learning very, very quickly how to focus and apply that, right? You go into karate so that you can learn how to punch and really make it work. You go to boxing to learn how to punch and really make it work. How to use they teach in boxing like how to punch from the floor up.
Right.
Where you're like using every single muscle in your body from your feet to your freaking fist to deliver force at the end of that. Which is very different from somebody just like swinging their arm. That's got something. If you got all 190 pounds of me behind that sucker, well, that's a very different thing. Yeah. Right. So it's not just the control. It's also how to generate even more by harnessing and controlling more of your body and more of yourself. Right. And then, oh, by the way, how to be in an environment where you are being faced with that, where that's coming at you, and how to handle that. Right. Very powerful lessons. And there's really no other way to learn that stuff than being in a boxing gym, being in a martial arts gym, going and rolling, doing jujitsu, right? One of the reasons why a lot of these guys who are in special forces and stuff like this do jujitsu is because you could be the biggest motherfucker out there and the strongest guy and the fiercest, and it does not matter. None of that matters at all. You have to go into and start playing strategy from the very beginning, right? The guys who are winning are not the guys who are the biggest and the strongest and the fastest. Like, no, it's the guys who are smartest and most patient and most willing to look for that opportunity to generate that opportunity to freaking crush you. Those are the guys who win, right? And there's no real other way to do that than in the ring.
Any martial arts school I've ever been in, and I'm sure there are exceptions, as there are with all things, the coolest guy was always the deadliest guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. I can't tell you how many gyms I've been into or guys that I've known, and like the guy's like, you know what, I'm just gonna hang out. You know what I mean? Like, he's not whatever, but that's the most dangerous dude in the,
absolutely.
in the gym.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's like one of the biggest things that gives you that control over that part of you is emotional control.
Yes.
Is emotional control, is being able to not be buffeted and shoved around by the world around you, not being messed around with other people, letting people talk shit and go like, yeah, okay. And your mom is a hoe. Okay. And you're gay. Okay. And are we actually going to dance, or are you just going to run your mouth? Because you're running your mouth? Cool. I'm good with that. Keep yapping. You want to dance? Are you sure? You really sure? Right. Yeah. And so it's that emotional control, and it's knowing when and how to apply that balance. Because the thing that a guy like that, who's really cool and calm and collected and in control, the reason he can do that is because he knows he has that capacity to back it up and defend himself and protect himself if he really needs to. Right. But he doesn't see any need to do that unless it's actually necessary. He's got that discernment to know when things are actually a threat. Right. When things is like, okay, this guy's just running his mouth because he's drunk. He's not actually a problem. He might do something stupid, so I got to be ready for that, but he's not actually a problem. Versus that guy wants to hurt me. Right. Like, he really wants to hurt me, and nothing I'm going to say is going to change that. So, like, that guy's a threat. I want to watch for that guy. And if you're always getting caught up in the noise and the BS around you, you can't be looking out for that guy who really wants to do you harm. Right.
Yeah. You ever seen the movie Braveheart?
Absolutely.
It's my favorite, probably my favorite film, and definitely the movie that inspired me to be an actor. And when he's little, when Uncle Argyle comes to rescue him or whatever, to come raise him, and he says, and the kid's like, "Oh, I want to teach me how to do this, how to play with the sword or whatever." He goes, "No." He takes it away from me. He says, "I'm going to teach you how to use this, and then I'll teach you how to use that." And I think that there are so many aspects of masculinity, true manhood and masculinity, where that is the philosophy, right? Yes. I think about sort of I saw a documentary about a samurai, the guys that make the samurai katanas.
Yep.
And you were talking about like the guys that go in these special forces guys, they just decide, it's almost a coolness. They decide they're going to do the thing, and then they do the thing. And I'm watching the guy shape the sword. There's no anger, there's no malice, there's no nothing. He's just shaping the sword over and over, and he doesn't. He's just focused on the task. And you see it by the end of it, it's so sharp. And it's so strong, because he just focused on the task. He just focused on the philosophy of making the sword the right way. Yep. But the guy that shaped the sword, he was also a samurai. Like, he was also a martial art. It was that's something.
Well, it's definiteness of purpose. It's deliberate, focused action to a particular goal. Right. Like, that is that kind of like primal, like archetypal warrior. It's like, I'm going to do this. I don't care what's between point A and point B. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to find my way through it. Why? Because I choose to. Because that's the thing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Not because I hate, not because I'm angry, not because any of that stuff. It's like, I'm going to go do that thing because that's what I want to do. Right? And it's that deliberate, definite action towards a deliberate, specific goal that allows you to focus all of that. One of the things I think that troubles a lot of the guys these days is they don't actually have that definite goal.
Troubles the who? I'm sorry, I missed that.
That troubles guys these days is they don't actually have that definite goal. They don't have that deliberate purpose. They don't have a purpose at all. And the problem with the success porn stuff is that it's like, oh, this guy's having fun. He's got Lambos and Bimbos and a yacht. Right. That means I've got to go get the Lambos and the Bimbos and yacht. So they do everything they need to get the Lambos and Bimbos and yachts, and they're not happy. They're trying to figure out why. It's like, well, that was that guy's goal. Maybe. We'll assume because he's got it up on Instagram, that's actually what he wanted, right? That actually makes him happy. Cool. Is he you? No. So why are you pretending to go after the things that he wanted to get to make him happy? Think it's going to make you happy. You got to figure out what you want. What's your purpose? Right? What is actually going to drive and be important to you? Like, what do you want?
So what do you think keeps guys from finding that out?
Good question. So I think a lot of it is never even knowing that you have to ask.
Right.
Right? Because you've got so many people out there willing to say, hey, you want to be happy? You want to be do you want to be a man? You want to be a man? Join my inner council of masculinity. Right. And you should be doing knuckle push-ups and cold showers every day with intermittent fasting and like buy these testosterone supplements and lift 500-pound deadlifts. And then you will be a man, my son. They say, well, I don't feel like a man, want to be a man. So I'll go do those things because he tells me like, this is what I got to do. He seems like he knows what he's talking about because he's got Lambos and Bimbos. So sure, we'll do that. Right. And it's not a bad placeholder. If you can deadlift 500 pounds, it's not a bad thing. It's capacity, right? And if you're chasing Lambos and Bimbos, you're making more money. Great. You make more resources. Right. But it also doesn't actually answer the question of what do you want? And most guys never actually sit down and ask themselves, what do I want? What actually makes me happy? Because part of that actually involves taking a look at yourself, right? To figure out, it's like, okay, what have I been doing? Why have I been doing it? What is actually important to me? What am I missing? What have I been doing that does not serve me? Does not give me what I want? Like, what mistakes have I been making? Like, you actually have to be able to take a long, hard, deep look at yourself to figure out who you are and what you want and what you need and what actually makes you happy rather than what people tell you should want or should make you happy. Right? One of the things about the space that can be kind of difficult for a lot of guys is that there's a lot of people who are here just chasing women. Like they've never, their sexual needs are not met. So they're out chasing women just to be able to get something because they've never really been able to solve that problem. Great. But there's a lot of people out there who want more than just sex. Like they actually would like relationships. Some people actually want to get married and have kids, even though everybody tells them that's the wrong thing to do. That's actually what they want. Right. So if you sit down all day, listen to, John from Modern Life Dating, who's like, never get married, or Fresh and Fit, like never get married, never have kids. Well, listen, you're hearing from is like, these guys seem to have it figured out. They know how to get women. They're telling me not to do this. Like, maybe I shouldn't do that. Deep down inside, that's what you really want. Right. But being able to separate yourself from the messages that you hear from the world, part of that discernment, part of that emotional control, part of being willing to be different in order to get what you actually want. Right. Almost everybody successful wasn't following in somebody else's footsteps and doing their plan. Right. Elon Musk definitely walking his own path. Jeff Bezos walking his own path. Bill Gates walking his own path. Rich Cooper walking his own path. Rollo Tomasi walking his own path. John from Modern Life Dating walking his own path. Ryan Stone walking his own path. Paul Benjamin walking his own path. Are they doing similar things? Sure. Are they learning from each other? Trading tips? Absolutely. Are they each doing things in their own way for their own reasons to accomplish a particular goal of their own so they can create a vision of their own? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the piece that a lot of guys never take that second step to do is after you've figured out how the game is played, what the rules of the game are. Once you figure that out, okay, great. Now, how do you want to play the game? Because the interesting thing about life is there's not one set of rules. People are playing million different games, right? There's million different sides of the manosphere, red pill space, pickup artist space, right? There's a million different sides of American culture. There's hundreds of thousands of different cultures worldwide on top of that that have millions of variations, right? So how do you win life?
Hmm.
Like, how do you get the top score in life? How do you keep score in life, right? If all that stuff is ambiguous, if there is no single answer to how do I keep score in life, how do I become successful, what does success look like? Well, that means you kind of have to figure that out on your own,
Right.
right? Now, a lot of people take the easy way out. They let somebody else tell them what success looks like and how to keep score, right? Success is having sex with 100 women. No, success is having a wife that stays at home to homeschool your 7 kids on your farmstead in Utah, right? Like, well, no, success is Lambos and bimbos on a yacht. It's like, no, no, no. Success is, you know, $1 million different dollars, $1 million different government courses, right? It's like, no, no, no. Success is, building schools for underprivileged kids in Africa. No, no, no. Success is fighting racism, right? No, no, no. Success, physics, like, no, 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 no. Success is like, and you can just freaking go down the road, like down the line, and there are a million different reasons of what success is and what it looks like, and all of them are different,
Yeah.
right? So you pick one that's the closest for you at the time. You say, okay, let me try this on. Okay, that's not right. Great. What do we need to tweak? Okay, do this, this, and this. But most people aren't willing to question the rules they were given to start with,
Right.
or the next set of rules they pick up, or the next set of rules that they pick up, or the next set of rules that they pick up. Guys go from the blue pill to the red pill. Different kind of rules, different success, different scoreboard. So they start
Right.
playing this game instead of this game, right? They start playing red pill game as opposed to blue pill game. Perfect. Okay, step up. Most of them are probably going to get more of what they want in life. But now they're just playing somebody else's game and somebody else's rules still,
Mm.
right? You have to do all that individual personal work to figure out your stuff, figure out what's actually working for you, figure out what actually feeds your soul, figure out what actually makes you feel good, figure out what you actually need before you can start figuring out, okay, what game do I want to play? Because there's a million different games. Which one do you want to play? Which one can I win? Or maybe, if you're really cool, make your own freaking game up with your own rules. Well, if you can make your own game with your own rules, then, well, you should be able to win that one. Making up a game that you can't win would be kind of stupid.
Right. Right.
So don't do that, right? Create a game with rules and scoreboard that you can actually win, right?
Right.
But there's nothing that says you can't. Most guys will never do that. Most people will never do that. And that's okay. As long as you find a game that you can win that actually delivers for you the results you want, it's probably good enough.
How does that have to do with the idea of ikigai?
Ikigai. So ikigai is a wonderful little principle. It's a Japanese word. The idea is that there are things that you're good at. There's things you enjoy. There's things that people will pay for. And there's things that the world needs, right? And so the more of these things you can combine, the better, right? So if there's something you're good at that people pay you for, well, that's a career. You're going in, doing your 9 to 5, getting a paycheck, right? If there's something you're good at that you love, well, that's passion. That's your broke guitar artist, right? Playing in the rock band in the bar, right?
Been there.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're good at it and people need it, well, that can be something like a vocation or a calling, right?
Yeah.
The priest who's ministering to the poor, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or if people will pay for it and people need it, well, again, that's a job, right? But if you find something that you're good at, that you enjoy doing, that people need, and they'll pay you for, that intersection of all 4 of those, that's the ikigai. That is kind of like that perfect blend where you get all of it,
Mm.
right? Where you get all of it, where you're doing something that you love, that you're good at, and people are paying you money and they actually freaking need it, right? So you're getting the satisfaction of actually doing good in the world. You're getting the financial resources that you need. It's not work for you because you're good at it. It's not work for you because you love it, right? And that's actually kind of where I get to find myself these days. I'm kind of good at hypnosis. There's a lot of guys that really need this kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They
Yeah.
are. People are willing to pay money for it. And I love this stuff.
Right.
So I'm lucky that I found this. Now, it's probably not something you're going to find at 18 because you probably don't know what you're good at. Haven't figured that stuff out yet. You don't really know what the world needs necessarily at that age.
Mm.
But as you grow older, as you start figuring yourself out more and you're figuring out what you're good at and what you love, figuring out what the world needs from you that like only you can provide, and figuring out like, can I get people to pay for this thing that I'm good at that people need? that's when you start stepping into that ikigai space that brings that like deep fulfillment where it's like effortless in a lot of ways to do this work, right? When I get up in the morning out of session, I'm not having trouble getting out of bed.
Mm.
I got a full day of sessions. I have like 4 sessions back to back. I had that like last week. By the end of it, am I drained because it's a lot of work? Oh yeah, like it's a lot of work dealing with people bringing all kinds of heavy weight, like all kinds of stuff they being brought to you. Like that is not easy stuff to deal with. But every time I'm done, like they're feeling better. I feel awesome. So at the end of the day, I feel drained and I feel awesome, even though I put in a full day's work and dealt with all kinds of stuff. Like it's not, and I'm not dreading the next day, right? It's wonderful. And it
Mm.
affords me the resources I need to be able to do things like take a couple weeks off over the next month or two to be able to do some more work on me because still need it. Peeling back layers of the onion, right? Still working on things for myself. So it creates this time and space and the resources I need to be able to do what I need to do. All from the same thing. And it's wonderful to be there.
Yeah.
Now, is that an easy thing to find? No, you got to know yourself.
Right.
You got to do a lot of exploration. You got to do a lot of experimentation, right? But that's kind of the fun part too, of saying, okay, well, what am I good at? Figure out what that is. Like everybody gets says, oh, well, you're supposed to make money coding. I suck at coding. I cannot code my way out of a paper bag. I would shoot myself in the face. No, I
Right.
cannot do that. Not me. Really good at solving problems though. Really good at figuring out stuff that people want to hide from me. Oh, really good at that. Did that for 20 years. I'm really good at that. Right. So digging around the back of the head to figure out stuff that they can't see, that I can do.
Is that that was a skill you picked up in intelligence? I mean, sort of trying to have.
Well, I think that intelligence was sort of a natural fit for how I'm built. And
Right.
like
Right.
growing up in a household that's very emotionally volatile, you always have to be like really on edge and very perceptive about everything that's happening.
Oh
You
yeah.
get really emotionally perceptive, like really fast, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
that's a horrible skill to have to learn.
Right.
But now that you've got that, now I can see all this little stuff and I'm like in tune with all this stuff. It's like, okay, cool. That means I get to see and pick apart all these little details that other people miss.
Right.
And I'm a pretty intelligent guy. I'm sitting at IQ about 128, 130. Right? Got a very puzzle oriented kind of guy, very systems and pattern oriented kind of guy. So it was kind of a natural fit for me
Mm.
of I'm walking into a world where kind of got an outline of what's going on, but half of the pieces of the puzzle aren't there. I'll never get them even if I wanted to, even if I could. Right. So I got to put the pieces of the puzzle together where half the pieces of the puzzle are missing. You know, others, people don't want to give me. So I got to figure out a way to get the pieces of the puzzle I need to put the puzzle together to understand enough of it to figure out what the heck is going on
Right.
so that I can then decide what to do. Right. Well, you do that for 23 years and it becomes second nature. Right. Part of it was that kind of marriage and that kind of confluence of like skills and natural abilities that I have that made it a really good fit for me. Right. And part of it was just practicing those skills and those kinds of environments for years and years that made me really good at doing that thing I was kind of naturally inclined to be good at. It's like take an athlete, right? You cannot take the average guy on the street and no matter how much training you give them, they're not going to be an Olympic athlete.
Right.
They just won't, right? They don't have the genetics or whatever it happens to be there. There's a certain kind of people that have just like that certain blend of genetics and stuff that give them the potential to be Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
But even then, you don't just throw into the Olympics. You have to spend years and years and years training them. Even if they've got that innate potential to be there, you have to spend years and years and years training them to learn the skills and do it right before they can actually perform at that level. Right.
Right.
So there's that innate talent, there's that innate freaking natural ability or inclination, plus decades of training. Like that is what combines to make an Olympic athlete. One without the other gets you nothing. It doesn't get you anywhere near, right? Make sense?
No, it makes total sense, man. Do you think it's better to find that when you're younger or older?
I think
Say-
I think the sooner you can find what you're good at, the better. The sooner you can recognize what you're good at, the better. Right. And if it's something that you enjoy doing, and most people enjoy doing things they're good at.
Yeah.
Right. But if you can find something you're good at that you enjoy, like truly good at, like that you can make yourself best in class, right? Go there first and then find ways to get people to pay for you, right? Find ways to make it, figure out how the world needs that thing. Scott Adams has that book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big.
Right. Yeah.
Talking about talent stacks, right? Like it's all just like, okay, I got this thing, this little thing here. Like I'm really good at this. Or maybe I'm good at these, I'm okay at these 2 or 3 things, but together, like there's nobody better than me at this combination of things.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of it when you're young, especially, is experiment and play with as many things as you can, because you never really know what you're good at until you get exposed to it and get into that environment. Right. And every environment that we're coming from, every home that we're coming from, we're limited in what we got exposed to when we were young.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Always did. And so as you're growing and you have more space to get out there in the world, try more things, try more stuff. Right. Because you never know when something is just going to click for you and make sense for you in a way of like, oh, that thing.
Right.
Like when I was growing up, I didn't plan on being an intelligence guy. I was like, okay, cop or firefighter or like real estate agent. I want to be a banker for a while. When like I went into, I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be a chiropractor. Was what I first started out studying in college after I decided like computer science was not my thing. I started out in computer science. That wasn't it. Electrical engineering, definitely not it. So I went pre-med to become a chiropractor. I'm like, this isn't it, because I'm going to have to spend 8 years before I get to do anything. Like, screw that. That's why I ran away and joined the Marine Corps.
Right.
And that's what introduced me until I'm like, oh, this I'm good at. Right. But even me, I had to do a lot of like just getting exposed to different things and trying different things before I found that thing is like this thing. And even the intelligence thing wasn't the end piece. Right. That was the thing that built a skill set that I got to take into the hypnosis thing. And like, no, this is what really gets me going. Helping guys like this, using these kinds of tools, using this, leveraging all this different skill set I've built over the years. Like this, God, I wish I had been doing this 20 years ago. I really do.
Could you have been as good though?
Probably.
You think so?
Probably. Like after 10 years of Intel experience, like that 10 to 20 jump, like I don't know that gave me enough of that skill set additionally to really move the needle. If I'd been able to trade 10 years of Intel experience for 10 years of client work in hypnosis, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Right. Now, I'm not going to trade that experience for the world because I got to do some really, really cool stuff and like some amazing opportunities and things I had to be involved in that I could never have been involved in any other way. No way I could do that. But if I could trade 10 years of Intel work for 10 years of hypnosis experience and 10 years of client work, I'd do that in a heartbeat today. Absolutely would.
That's fair. What is manhood to you, and what are some inviolable laws of men?
Manhood and inviolable laws of men. Wow. Kind of hard to put that stuff in words, isn't it? I think that the best books that I've read on masculinity and manhood would have to be like Jack Donovan, Way of Men, his series.
Good stuff. That's good stuff.
Very powerful, very powerful. Also, Magician, Warrior, Lover, King.
Yeah,
just talking about those primal, masculine archetypes, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to encapsulate what manhood is, but if I had to put it in words, it would be embodying to the most you can that sort of primal masculine ideal of strength, of capacity, of willingness to endure hardship, the willingness to provide and protect, right? The willingness to drive through adversity to create, right? The deliberateness and precision of action, the definiteness of purpose, that focus and will that allows you to like push through any adversity, any obstacle, no matter what, to accomplish a particular goal. Like that fundamentally is the essence of masculinity and manhood. Being a man is learning how to take that and put that in service to yourself, to those you care about, to your fellow man, and to your tribe. However big you define that tribe. That may be nation, that may be world, that may just be family, that may just be the gang you're part of, or the freaking private men's group you're a part of, or the guys on your block, right? But taking all that energy and all those talents and putting it in service not only to yourself, but to yourself and others, right? Because no man is an island. And while the lone wolf icon is like, oh, I want to be the lone wolf, it's like, no, you freaking don't. No, you don't. Masculinity is not about being a man is not about being alone. Masculinity and being a man is about being a man in the company of other men.
Right.
Right.
But,
and that tribe is so important, and you cannot run around without one. At least in my opinion.
No, I mean, that makes 100% sense. I mean, I don't think a man can really know where he measures up in terms of the manhood Olympics unless he's around other men, especially other men that are pursuing things, that are going out there, that are leveling up all the time, or always seeking something better. And I think that the person that's like, oh, I'm the lone wolf, I think to some extent has to be afraid of understanding exactly where they measure up. You know, I used to be the lone wolf guy.
Yeah.
And then I realized,
well, there's the idea of this, the Sigma male, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm the guy who's the outsider and I'm moving between worlds. It's like, yeah, that's because you can't be accepted in any of them, asshole. It's because no one will have you. It's like, there's a reason you're a loner. Now, it's like, I've always felt very much alone and kind of on the outside looking, and I always really have. I've always felt very different and things like that. And I think in a lot of ways that I am, but I also think that because I'm different, I always bring something unique to every group I'm in. So I'm accepted not because I'm the same as everybody else. I'm accepted because of the unique talents that I bring. And I think that's something about masculinity and men that Jack Donovan talks about the way of men is like everybody's looking. It's like, okay, you want to be part of this tribe? Great. Show me what you got.
Right.
Don't show me that you're the same. Show me that you bring something valuable to the tribe.
Right.
Right. Whatever the hell that happens to be. Right. If we're a bunch of band of big ass burly honking warriors, like great, be the musician.
Right.
Right. Or be the magician, the one who has that freaking sage wisdom, right? Or be the lover that helps people like be able to freaking relate to each other. Right. If you can't be the thing that they are, you don't have to. You just have to be valuable and useful in some way. And so you don't have to be like everyone else. Being like everyone else is a freaking trap.
Right.
Right. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said that imitation is suicide. Right. And he's right. Trying to be somebody else is suicide, because if you're trying to be somebody else, you never, ever, ever get what you want and need. The best you get is what the other people think that the person you're pretending to be wants and needs, which often isn't what you want and need. Right. So you end up dying inside because you can't actually be yourself. You always have to be someone else.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it does mean that you have to be somebody worth being around. You have to bring something to the table. So make sure there's something that you bring to the table that makes being around you worthwhile.
Yeah.
But fucking be you, for God's sakes. Be the unique you. Bring that unique piece that nobody else can, please.
Yeah. That's the thing that I always get when I'm around men. And it's something that I was missing for a long time, because I played football and I did martial arts and da-da-da-da. But then when I got into the world, I got into the artistic world, and that's not the most masculine space. It used to be, but of late, in the last 15 or whatever years, it wasn't. So I lost touch with that male camaraderie, that sort of iron sharpens iron thing. And that's really what men do, is we sort of cut the bullshit with one another. We sharpen one another. If the men are virtuous and they're chasing something and they're trying to transcend their own human condition, right? And so
absolutely. The other piece, the important piece about that, one of the other things is that you have to have iron in order to sharpen iron.
Right.
You can't get better unless you're with people who are as good as you or better to challenge you to make you grow. Right. If you're the average of the 5 people around you and everyone around you sucks, they're going to drag you down.
Right.
If you're the average of 5 people around you and they're all better than you, then you better step the shit up.
Yeah.
Right. You better step up and match their level, because that's what they're going to expect of you. But there's also what helps you grow and what drags you up to that level. Kicking and screaming sometimes. Right. Yeah. Sometimes we don't want to do our work, and it's like, shit, these guys expect it of me and they're right. And I don't want to, but I have to anyways, because it's the right thing to do.
Right. And it really is. It's sort of binary. It's like you either go and you level up and you expand, or you fall off.
Yeah. Well, stagnation is also an option. Like you grow, you stay the same, or you drop. Right. But if everyone around you is getting better and you're staying the same, that is by default kind of dropping behind.
But that's what I mean. Yeah. You can't stay in the group. You either have to level up, or you're going to fall off somewhere.
You have to still always be able to pull your weight.
Right. Always.
Right. Always. Like there's guys like you look at groups like, Rich Cooper's Entrepreneurs Cars group, right? His men's group. There's guys in there that are struggling.
Right.
Guys that are just coming in, or guys that have been doing well for a while that hit a wall and they're struggling again. And every single man in there is like, okay, cool. You need help. Sweet. We're there for you. You're part of the tribe. We're going to help you get up. We're going to help you make progress. The thing that is important about that is that those guys want help and are willing to try.
Right.
And men who are on their purpose and who have their stuff on point are always willing to help someone who is willing to be helped and who is willing to do the work. Where they stop helping is when you stop trying. right? When you stop being willing to do the work, when you give up, they're like, oh, you're going to give up on you? Why should I not?
Right.
Why should I drag you around if you're giving up? Right.
Well, I mean,
sometimes that's the thing where like I have to kick you in the head to make sure you stop. It's like you feel having a pity party. Cool, smack you beside the head. It's like, you really want to be sorry for yourself? You really want to give up? Is that really what you want? You're like, no. All right, you're gonna get off your ass? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we can go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a survival thing. If we talk about it, we were unconscious as a species far longer than we were conscious. Like if you had a guy that was not pulling his weight, we could have died, right? Like we could have been killed by a rival tribe or whatever it was. So, a couple more questions here, and then we're going to wrap up. When did you kill your father? Metaphorically, I mean. Oh, you haven't?
No, no. Well, I'm not a big fan of that.
Okay.
Sort of construction. I think that at a certain point, like I got the benefit of a lot of initiatory stuff, right? Like I joined the Marine Corps.
Right.
That's an initiatory process. You're going through a process, right? I became a Freemason. That's an initiatory process, right? And so a lot of that has symbolic death and rebirth in it. So it's not that I had to kill your father. It's that you had to let the old you die so that the new you can be reborn.
Right.
So I've been through that, and I've done that a number of times in my life in the Marine Corps and Masonry and different spiritual practices I've done, plant medicines I've done, right? I've done that over and over again. And that cycle of death and rebirth is the same kind of thing of killing your father. But like I left my parents behind a long time ago because they never really did get me. They still kind of don't. I mean, I'm fucking weird. I'm not normal. Like they're just never going to quite understand me. And that's coming to that realization was probably around the same time I left and joined the Marine Corps and just like bailed out of Kansas. I'm like, that is not my world, not my place. Nice. Off you go. I'm going to go. So if I had to pick a point where I killed my father metaphorically, like, and left the nest and like really sat on my own, like joining the Marine Corps was probably it. When I was 21, almost 22 years old.
Wow. What historical figure, either archetype or a demigod or whatever, or actual historical figure inspires you? And you can be one and one.
Man, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Nice.
Just because he was such a deep thinker on stuff like that. Man, who else on the historical side? Caesar and Marcus Aurelius, of course. Just because the Roman Empire was such a huge, powerful influence on life in the world. Winston Churchill, because the guy was a complete jackass and got stuff done. Which is kind of always fun, right?
Yeah.
Man, like
he used to mouth. He would go to Shakespeare plays at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he would like mouth the Shakespeare as they were doing it on stage. It used to drive the actors insane.
Oh, I bet it did. Just because he's an asshole, right?
Great.
But yeah, you look at a lot of different like military leaders throughout history. Of course, like Chesty Puller is like the patron saint of the Marine Corps in a lot of ways, right?
Who? I'm sorry.
Chesty Puller. He was the guy, Korean War, commanded in one of the regiments of Marines that were in Korea. Got surrounded by 8 Chinese divisions, fought their way out. That's why you have the 8-pointed, the octagon hat, the camouflage hat that the guys that the Marines wear has 8 points, is to commemorate the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, where he fought his way out from 8 freaking Chinese battalions. Outnumbered 8 to 1, freaking fight his way out. It's kind of like he's sort of like the patron saint of the Marine Corps in a lot of ways, right?
Nice.
And so you read all these different stories, and so it's not really one individual or anything like that. It's that amalgamation of different examples of the warrior archetype and the king archetype and the magician archetype, right? Merlin was a favorite of mine. King Arthur, Merlin, Knights of the Round Table. Like, how much better can you get than that for a story of like manhood and masculinity? And all the problems that come with that when you mix in women.
Well, that reminds me of when you were talking about that one spot you don't want to go into. I think that was one aspect of the story, is the dark part of the wood.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, look, man,
that's the place he had to go in order to get the most from it, right?
Right.
Got to face the darkness if you want to get to the light.
I just read for the first time "Hero of a Thousand Faces," Joseph Campbell's, and how many times that story repeats itself in so many different sort of myths all over the world. It's just like, look, this is what it is. There's no getting around it. I think that on some level, we as human beings, especially men, like we know what we have to do. It's just choosing whether or not to step through that,
Yeah, these old stories, these old archetypes exist for a reason. There's truths in there And there's lessons and there's stories in there that we have to learn
Yes.
in order to really become men, in order to really become full-fledged people of any kind, man or woman. There's feminine versions of this stuff too, but these stories exist for a reason. Like, it's been around for thousands of years for a reason. We do initiatory stuff for a reason. We do the right from boyhood to manhood for a reason. We've done that for hundreds and thousands of years for a reason. It means something. There is importance there. And sitting down and saying, okay, haven't been doing this stuff for a long ass time. It's important. There's things in there that I should have. Maybe I need to do some time catching up and doing all that stuff. All those old things, doing the initiations, doing the metaphorical death and rebirth, doing the metaphorical killing your father, right? Going into the darkness, right? There's things in there that are important that you have to have in order to be whole and complete and healthy as a man, as a person. We've lost touch with that. We lost sight of that. We don't have that in our culture these days.
Right.
So you got to do that on your own. You got to figure out what that is on your own.
They got to see guys like you.
That helps. Tends to accelerate the process. Yeah.
For sure, man. You remind me of definitely the Merlin wizard archetype for sure. And
Thank you.
The realm that you delve into, and it's a realm that I think people don't give enough respect to, right? Like, from my perspective, it's like people are really, they really only think that the material world is what exists, but there are all these other forces and all these other realms that we exist in simultaneously.
Yeah, it was the material realm and the conscious mind, because the conscious mind is the thing we can actually direct and control.
Right.
So we're going to focus on the things we control. It's kind of like the drunk guy looking for his keys under the street light, because that's where you can see. Right? I was like, yeah, that's where you want to look for it, because that would be nice and comfortable because you can see it. But really, the keys are in the darkness over there.
Yeah.
And that's what guys like me are for. We're here to help guide you in the darkness, help find the stuff in the darkness that you can't see, that you can't get access to easily. That's freaking scary.
Yeah.
Touch, let's play with. I'm your native Sherpa for the dark part of your soul. That's what I do.
Well, you guys check them out, hypnosisformen.com, right?
Yes.
And you also have a YouTube channel.
I do. I have a YouTube channel at Hypnosis for Men, Twitter and Instagram as well at Hypnosis for Men. Hypnosisformen.com. You can get a hold of me there. Schedule a free 45-minute consultation. We'll be able to sit down and talk through whatever kinds of issues you're working through right now, the kinds of things you want to work on, what's not working in your life, so we can sort of figure out what problems you actually need to solve and ways that you can solve them.
Guys, I highly recommend that you sign up for it. I've done it myself, and it's made a world of difference in my life. So, and I thank you for all the help you've given me.
You're quite welcome. It's been an honor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm going to have all the information down in the description, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe, and go to Hypnosis for Men and sign up for his YouTube channel as well. So thanks, guys. Another episode of Heroes and Men. Ryan, it's been a pleasure, brother.
It has been an absolute pleasure, Laris. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Be good, man. Peace,
Cheers.
guys.